for starters, can you talk to us a little bit about how political violence and uncertainty, how do they impact our mental health? And because a lot of people, we see the news and we keep it moving, or we hear about a story and we keep it moving. Sometimes it'll stop us in our, and we'll gasp a little, but we keep it moving. But regardless of our reaction, it is having some sort of an impact. A lot of us just aren't clear on what that impact is. Can you talk with us about that just to the level set?
Absolutely. You actually brought up one of the main things that I feel we could focus on, or if nothing else, place our attention on environmental wellness. You saying that you
Mm,
decided to stay inside and just kind of like regroup, recenter, and really connect with the space that you may feel you have a little more control over or a little more control with your immediate environment. Because what we're really processing is our very real indirect, but this overarching environmental wellness that is being influenced right now. And then also you
mm,
said another thing, like sometimes we see it and then we just kind of keep it moving. We've seen it. I mean, we've consumed it. Even if we're not being present with it,
ooh,
we've taken something in. And sometimes we're not always conscientiously aware of what that looks like. But I can also give my own personal experience around it. I realized the other morning that I had a very weird dream, and it was about this, like feeling as if there are people who
mm,
do not want me around. So it was white men in it, and I don't dream about white men at all, but they were mistreating
huh,
me in the dream. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was just kind of like out and about, like at a grocery store. And in my conscious life, I'm good. I'm recognizing these things. I'm being
right,
accountable, recognizing this collective experience that we're having. And so it's like, okay, as long as I don't watch too much of it, I'll be okay. But in that
mm,
unconscious space, it was like, no, 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 baby. You're processing these things. You've consumed it. So
wow,
this idea of like our environmental wellness, indirectly and also directly, how that really does impact us in our body. This is our most direct environment. And then also the things that we're
mm.
consuming, even if we're not conscientiously aware of how much we're consuming it in conversations, we're consuming it in the background, we're consuming it when we're trying not to really acknowledge what's happening. They're the things that we're really kind of processing, even if we're not fully aware of that.
I'm to hear you break it down like that. It was just taking me sort of through my own trip through my week last week, and there I told my audience this. There was one day I was on New Jersey Transit, and I looked up and I realized I'm the only black woman in this car, like that I could see in this portion of the car where I could see pretty much everybody. And it typically that's not something that would have even been a part of my. I mean, I'm always aware. Like, let me keep it 100. It ain't never gonna be too many times I'm in a room where I'm the only black person. I'm not aware of that, but the awareness hit me with the oh, and that could be a problem, right? And there was one, it was a game that had been let out, and so there were a number of people who had on the jersey for the team, and it wasn't a sport that's necessarily affiliated with us. And I was like, ooh, I really am. I just remember being sort of arrested in my breath in that moment and arrested in my thoughts. Like it took me a second to like, all right, you good, but I had to scan the room, and that wasn't at all what I was intending. And so the idea that it can catch us unaware in your dream state, I feel like that's a violation. That should be like your private. Like, how you gonna bust up? Why can't it be having white supremacy in my own dreams? Like that feels like I've been violated in more ways than
Exactly.
one. In more ways than one. When we talk about these sort of challenging moments, one of the things that people always will reference is self care, right? And yeah, I like going to the spa as much as anybody, but spas can be expensive. I like going to, I like I like getting my nails done, but it's not necessarily that I come out of having my nails done and then life is just good. So talk to us about our notions of self-care, and if our traditional understandings of what self-care looks like is going to really meet this moment. And I think both of the things that I just mentioned also tend to be gendered forms of self-care.
Mhm.
And I'm often wonder about the brothers and what they are doing, or male identified people, how are they engaging in self-care and what it looks like for them. Talk to us about what self-care looks like, this very abstract concept that for many of us doesn't even seem like something we have time or capacity to do, but talk to us about what it looks like and why it's necessary, particularly in moments like these.
For sure, so many things. That acute awareness and this idea of like self-care being flexible and adaptable and meeting us where we are. The
Mm,
idea of even having gendered ideas of self-care. It's like, what do you need in this moment? What do you need at this time in this phase? We're actually dealing with this collective experience. Again, here we are 5 years later, we just came out of COVID, this very real collective experience, and all the things that came with that. And here we are really having this shared experience again. And so recognizing self-care
Mm,
could look like a collective experience right now. We'll potentially talk about that a little bit. Collective and community self-care. These conversations, allowing yourself to recognize that I may be consuming these things or even trying not to consume very particular things. What would I also like to consume? What could be helpful? Hearing these types of conversations, having our reality validated, especially when
mm,
it's not validated in a lot of experiences. And so, going to some of those acute spaces, even internally, self care could be acknowledging these feelings. You recognizing that when I was in that cart, I felt something. I felt
girl.
something differently than I felt before. Like I said,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, I also agree. I'm aware, especially about my environments and when I'm the only person, and also recognizing like, oof, now I feel something around that. I feel like maybe
Right.
I have to be hyper vigilant. Do I feel less safe? And recognizing a part of self-care is acknowledging those feelings and really honoring them and attending to them. So these external expressions of self-care, very real, and they can show up in any way. Like you said, the spa, the idea of taking a walk, taking a breather, recognizing your
Mm,
breath, that's self care. How can we care for this internal environment? How can I care for my immediate environment? What do we have in our home? What are the conversations that are happening in our home? What are the colors? What are the aromas? Like, how can you take care of yourself in this more acute, maybe more specific, more individualized way? Does that
mm.
make sense?
It does. It does. Can we sit with this topic of hypervigilance for example for a moment? I feel like being
Absolutely.
hypervigilant is sort of a black person's. It's part of our survival skill. Like we're
Hmm.
always hyper aware because we've kind of had to be. Like that's just sort of how we've had to roll throughout our experience in this society. But hypervigilance can also require a whole lot of energy. I think of it like being aware is like your basic Google search. Hypervigilance requires the extra energy of an AI generated. We've been talking a lot about AI this morning, but it feels like hypervigilance is something that we have employed as a survival skill, but it's also something that when it's sort of like resilience, like you ain't supposed to always be resilient. You're only supposed to be
Right.
resilient against the thing, that moment that requires it. But so many of us live in a state of resilience. We live in a state of hypervigilance. Talk with us about the impact that maintaining that sort of hyper attuned to all the stressors that are around us, which it can be a survival skill, but can also really be detrimental to us. Talk to us about the impact of being hyper vigilant or living in a persistent state of resilience. What impact does that have on us?
I mean, I don't want to say so many in a way to make it, if nothing else, feel more overwhelming or overstimulating. But the idea of stimulation, we can feel very overstimulated when we feel this hypervigilance, and it can really impact our perception and our reality.
Mm,
So the more you see things that you feel are harmful, the more you'll perceive those things, and that really does become your reality. And that's one aspect of it. And that's one that sometimes we are, like you said, it's been a part of our survival method. And so it's like a conditioned thing that's also kind of been passed down. Just think about potentially some of the things that you would hear when you leave the house. Like, be careful, make sure you call me, make sure you stay in touch, make sure you're with your
right,
friends. And so this
right.
idea of if I don't call my parents, if I don't check in, they're going to worry. But more than anything, I'm not safe. If I'm not with a group of people, then I'm not safe. If I'm not checking in a very particular way, if I'm not watching my surroundings, I'm not safe. And not to say that these things aren't helpful and they can't be helpful for precautionary measures, but also recognizing how does it internalize,
Mm,
excuse me, seasonal allergies.
mm-hmm.
How
I
does it
get it.
really impact? It's taking over. I'm like, wintertime is doing a thing. But how does
Mm,
it really impact how you show up, how you feel when you leave the house, how you feel when you show up in different spaces? And so this hypervigilance can impact our perception, it can impact our reality, but it also can really impact our bodies. Where are you holding it? Where are you storing it? Where are your muscles? Where are your gut, your emotions? Where are you storing this? So if we're hypervigilant, we may be feeling hypervigilant around this, meaning I may be hypervigilant around fear. So if I'm storing all this fear in my body,
mm,
where is it showing up? How do I feel when I'm sleeping? The idea, like you said, that felt very intrusive. That is not how my dreams work. So I had to be
right.
very intentional about what I was saying before I went to sleep or what I was really processing if I woke up in the middle of the night. Like being mindful of like how I allowed myself to go back into that restful space because there was an emotion that was stored somewhere. There's this
Mm,
hypervigilance that said, you're not encountering this right now, but you feel like you need to be aware of that. You feel you need to be on alert that if you see a white man at the grocery store, then this is how it's going to treat you. And so it gave me this opportunity to go in and say, okay, well, let's attend to this feeling of hypervigilance. Let me attend to this feeling of feeling overstimulated. Let me attend to this feeling of the safety that I don't feel is in outside of my immediate environment. So we can
mm,
internalize those things and it really can be stored in our body. Think about it this way: what you're saying to yourself, what you're saying in your mind, your body is processing that. Even the things that you're not saying out loud.
right.
These are the stories. This is the narrative that your body is living in. So when we live in that hypervigilant space, we're living in this narrative that is really creating our perception of reality, which influences our behaviors, which influences our
Mm,
responses and our reactions. So that
mm.
may have been a very broad in perspective, but these are some of the things that we're dealing with just kind of acutely and sometimes unconsciously.
Right. No, and it's important that we're aware that these things have a real impact, right? One of the things I'm really excited about this year is we have the sponsorship from BetterHelp, which is a company that basically connects people to therapy. And I'm like, I need all of us. I feel like a part of reparations packages should be every black person gets a therapist. A culturally competent therapist. I think that's just something that
Yes.
we all need. But the idea that there are tools we can employ, and I want to circle back to something you said earlier. Like it doesn't have to be going to the spa. You can go take a walk, right? I
Yeah.
saw a video of this brother who is a chicken farmer, and I think I have it queued up for one of our moments of gratitude later this week. But he's basically like, we're going to tap into the only free dopamine and therapy that's still left in this country, and that's being in nature, right? If
Mhm.
you can't afford therapy, if you can't afford, highly expensive drugs that are going to help you sort of regulate your emotions from a biochemical space, go outside and hug a tree. Go roll around in some grass. It's the freest that we still have as it pertains to mental health therapy and free dopamine. So I thought that was kind of cute. But I was just thinking about that as you were just saying, the importance of being aware of how all of these things impact us. And so for a lot of us, particularly Black women, and I know that this is something that most of us experience, but I'm speaking as a Black woman who I know me and my sister friends, we struggle with this. I believe brothers do as well, but I'm not in brother circles. So I'm give us a call, brothers, if this is something that impacts you as well. But there's this feeling of I don't have time to rest because I have all of these other things to do. Right. And there's a
Hmm.
struggle of feeling almost guilty about prioritizing your individual well being when there is collective suffering. So, no, I can't afford to take time off. Don't you see how my people are struggling? No, I can't afford to do this to take care of myself. Don't you see how my people are dealing with this, that, and the other? Talk with us about the importance, particularly for those of us who have considered ourselves as leaders, whether in the community sense or in the family sense, or we're someone that our local community looks to. For those who are in that position, overcoming the mindset that says I can't prioritize my own care because of all the suffering so many others are going through. Help us achieve some balance there. What would you say to folks who are struggling with that?
Okay. I mean, we get to go wherever you would like to go with this, but I'm gonna put a few things out here and you tell me what you think. It's so interesting. It's this paradox. It's this internalized experience of I'm not worthy of the care that I'm trying to provide to everyone else.
Oh, oh,
Is
huh.
this idea of I have to give so much of myself. I have to surrender even the idea that I am deserving of care. Because if I care for myself, that takes away from the care that I'm willing to offer to others.
Wow.
So
Wow. Okay.
worthiness, what do you feel you're deserving of? This idea that
Mm,
I have to give so much and I'm not deserving of the care that I'm so willing to give out, so willing to choose to give to others. Where's the
mm,
choice to acknowledge that I'm a part of this too? I am my
right.
people. So when I don't care for myself, what message am I actually sending? That this is what it looks
Wow.
like to care for others. This is what it feels like. This is the experience of care. So we get to really
Mm,
be with these ideas of what has been conditioned and what has been internalized as care, what has been modeled. When we saw, and this is a general statement, please don't come for me. The idea of seeing our moms and our parents, taking so much care of others while also not taking care of
mm.
themselves. So we internalize this idea of to care for another means to not care for myself.